Hello everybody, I'm here today to do a review for The Hunger Games. I just went and saw the movie yesterday, and I think I have a few things I have to say about it. The Hunger Games obviously is based on a popular book franchise that's just recently ended, I think, and in a way it's sort of, I think, replaced the Harry Potter and Twilight thing for, there's sort of a void that was left by those two franchises, and I think Hunger Games wishes to fill that void, and judging by the weekend numbers so far, it very well might. This plot is it's about a young girl who gets sent to a large battlefield that is monitored by this uber government that seems to have a lot of control over all of these 12 districts. And they basically run this gigantic reality television show, not too unlike Survivor, where the kids have to kill each other, fight to the death, and with one survivor left out of all of the districts. And it's kind of like a yearly sport, televised thing that goes on. And the movie raises a lot of questions as far as differences between the working class and the wealthier class of people, and there's a lot politically going on within the subtext. The main character is played by Jennifer Lawrence. Her character's name is Katniss Everdeen, and originally in the story, her sister is was drawn from the lottery for her district to play in these Hunger Games, and she takes her place as tribute to play in the games instead. While she's there, she meets the other boy who within her district named Peeta Mellark, played by Josh Hutcherson, and he's supposed to sort of be the more charismatic one of the two. One of the big things about the Hunger Games is that you have a better chance of survival if you can get sponsors who send you little gifts while you're playing, matches or water or medicine, these kind of things. They send you via little parachutes while you're in the field fighting. If they like your I don't want to say character, but kind of like if they like your persona and they want to see you win, they'll sponsor you with these random items throughout. And Josh Hutcherson's character seems to get that a little bit more. He's really good on the person scale, on the people-to-people kind of thing. He's really good at getting people to like him, but he's not very good at fighting, and he's not very strong. He was raised a baker, whereas Katniss, played by Jennifer Lawrence, is a hunter and a fighter, and she's all about the bronze, but she isn't very good about being very charismatic for the camera and those kind of things to get sponsors. So they sort of come together and make a good little team as far as that goes. And there's a lot of other stuff that's going on in there too, as far as this sci-fi world that they've created. And so yeah, first let's bring up the subject of originality. Now, first of all, one important thing to know going into this movie is that there's been a lot of other movies that kind of covered this sort of ground, and quickly, early on in the stages of development, this movie was compared to a Japanese film that came out about 10-11 years ago called Battle Royale, and I think it was based on a Japanese comic book or manga. And that movie has, I think, a few sequels of its own over there in Japan. And if you watch that movie, it is very similar as far as the story, the plot, and and the idea of this like battle to the death. Of course, the tone of that movie is very different. Battle Royale is somewhat of a dark comedy, I think, or satire. Even though it's very, very brutal and very violent, it is also sort of a satire. So you're not supposed to take everything sort of serious. It's sort of a Japanese rock and roll kind of movie, whereas The Hunger Games takes itself very seriously, and it really tries to come off as somber or sad. So there's that. There's also another movie that deals with the whole battle to the death thing. I think called Series 5 or Series 7, The Contenders, which I think was a British film. and it was also an independent film dealing with a lot of the same ideas. Even lesser known, and I would say not recommended in any way, shape, or form, is a really low-budget, straight-to-DVD horror flick called Slashers. You can look it up on IMDb if you really want. I think it was released by Fangoria magazine, and it's basically the idea is there's a reality television show where a bunch of people enter to win, where one survives, and there's all of these serial killer characters for the reality show that they have to fight that can kill them at any time. It's very schlocky and pretty much a terrible movie, but it kind of deals with a lot of the same ideas, even if it's not done nearly as well. And all of these things happened before the Hunger Games. Of course, I think all of which owe some sort of debt to both Lord of the Flies to a certain extent and The Most Dangerous Game, the two books, kind of a combination of the two. And if you want to look into it a little bit further, I think Hunger Games owes its debts to a few other things. There's this the whole idea of a world being created, or a giant reality television show, and dealing with the idea of people's voyeuristic needs to watch others suffer, and the morality of what reality TV means in our day and age, blah, 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 blah. A lot of that you can find in the Truman Show. The idea of the rich upper class who is completely oblivious or ambivalent towards a lower starving lower class, and the rich upper class is just ridiculous and dressed like clowns and makeup, and they have absolutely no cultural connection or relevance to the lower class, and spend their time with frivolous thoughts and frivolous ideas. That all really could be found back in Brazil. So the Hunger Games I found as a plot, as a story, as a concept, book or not, which I've never read, as a movie, I really felt kind of like a hodgepodge of a lot of other movies. So there's that. The controversy, which I'll go into now, which has to deal with the violence of the movie, and is the movie too violent, or should the MPAA have rated it R instead of PG-13. I know Harvey Weinstein, who recently has been in a battle with the MPAA over his documentary Bully, really cried out against this movie as it should be R-rated. And I have to agree with Harvey on this one. I think the movie should be R-rated, but what I mean by that is that the movie I saw shouldn't be R-rated. The movie I saw was a PG-13 movie, and it was cut and directed in such a way to be PG-13. The movie it should have been R-rated. And I think philosophically my biggest problem with the movie is that it's a movie about violence. The underlying concern of the plot deals with teen killing other teens. We're dealing with battles to the death here, and I feel like because the movie wants to be a PG-13 mass market science fiction blockbuster, and it directs the movie in such a way to be PG-13, that the violence isn't dealt with in an honest or I would say even an ethical way. To make a few broad comparisons, I think what I told my friend about this movie when I first saw it is that it would be as if you were doing a movie about an orgy, but you shot all the sex scenes from the shoulders up to keep it PG-13. It just doesn't make sense. And I'm not saying this as like I love gratuitous violence and I need gratuitous violence and I want to see blood and guts and all of this stuff, but that is what the movie's about. And the fact that the movie tries to redirect the meaning of what the movie is. I mean, there's this kind of this faux love story thing that's sort of going on between Lawrence and Hutcherson, and there's a will they or won't they kind of plot going on that the movie really tries to steer its direction towards, and I felt myself kind of being like, no, that's not what the movie's about. You're going away from the target here. And then there's this there's a lot of these moments of the whole voyeuristic thing where they're watching the games and sort of commenting on it, and you see a lot of things from a distance, or you don't, or they make large jumps in the plot as far as the time goes, and I feel like the movie is trying to walk on eggshells to not be what it really is, and I feel like it's a very conflicted film because of that. I feel like there's things that you can get away with in a novel where you only have to describe something. So you can say something like, and then she stabbed him in the heart and he died, and that doesn't imply the type of graphicness that that's going to mean in a film. So you can write something like that, and it can be for a preteen readership. But as soon as you translate that to a visual medium, you're dealing with R-rated subject matter. That is simply what's going on, and to not own up to that and try and shoot it in such a way that, you know, we're going to shake the camera a lot, you're not going to really be able to tell what's going on, but then we'll show you the dead body afterwards so that you know who died. Well, you're still dealing with really dark subject matter, you're still dealing with violence, so to not show it, or to not show the brutality of what is actually going on, almost sort of is making light of the dark subject matter, and none of the emotional punch that the movie is supposed to have really comes through because of that. There's a lot of characters in this movie, and I don't feel like a lot of them get the amount of attention that they deserve in order for the story to work in the way that it wants to work. There's a few of the other players that we kind of hear about peripherally, but we don't really see until towards the last half hour of the movie, and then when all of these high emotional points take place, they kind of fall flat because you don't really know or care about these characters that well, other than the Jennifer Lawrence and Josh Hutcherson character, which I think kind of undercuts a lot of what the movie's about. Now, I know it sounds like I really didn't like the movie, and I think it's an interesting movie. Here's what I'll say about the movie, finally, is that it's a movie that at least wants to be about something. Even if it doesn't quite get there in the way that it's directed, there are things about The Hunger Games that I do think works. I think Jennifer Lawrence is pretty good. She's not an actress that I particularly get excited about. I know a lot of people really liked her in Winter's Bone, and she's kind of been in a lot of movies ever since, and I've seen a lot of these movies, and every once in a while she's kind of interesting, every once in a while I find her kind of bland, and I'd say she's kind of up and down in this movie too. But I think when she's working with other characters, when she's working with Josh Hutcherson or with Woody Harrelson, who plays their mentor, who survived Hunger Game player, who's quite a bit older than them, who's kind of telling them the rules and everything. That stuff's kind of interesting, and I kind of like that. There's a lot of lead up to the actual games themselves, and I would say probably too much lead up. There's a first act that really feels like it goes on for a while, and that's fairly interesting. Some of that stuff is fairly interesting too. A lot of the camera work, I have to call this out, a lot of the camera work looks kind of cheap and a little handy-cam-like, and some of that is to get the rating that they wanted, and but I don't feel like the cinematography is all that impressive either, and I feel like the pacing is really all over the place. It kind of goes fast, slow, and that's an issue for me. And there are some set design that's really cool though. Once you see the major city where all the rich people live when they travel on the train to get there, there's some of that set design is kind of nice. Of course, it's only really seen in very short establishing shots, and then you're inside buildings for the remainder of that until they're out in the forest. A lot of the fight scene, not just the fight scenes, but a lot of the stuff when they're on the actual battlefield in the forest is shot kind of in a meek way, where it's done in a lot of close-ups. You don't get to see, he doesn't really play up the landscape very much. He doesn't really fill his frame. Gary Ross, the director, doesn't really fill his frame in a very cinematic way a lot of the times. It strangely sometimes felt a little bit like a TV movie in how many close-ups there were. But he did want some of that emotion to come through in the performances, and I understand that. But there's it seemed like that was really the only way he knew how to make us feel anything, because a lot of the characters weren't developed enough, and a lot of the gravitas of the actual Hunger Games themselves was being forsaken for that PG-13 rating. So the only way he could make an emotional impact is with the score and with the performances, which would be why there would be a lot of close-ups, obviously. So I like the fact that the movie is about something, and I like the fact that it's a teen science fiction that's sort of done in a way that America has never seen before, at least, and it's an interesting movie to be as popular as it is, and I think there's enough here that works that it just left me wanting more, and that's what my main problem with the movie is. It's kind of a huge tease in a lot of ways, and I feel like the sequels hopefully can deal with some of these issues better. I really think they need a new director. I mean, Gary Ross, who did Pleasantville and Seabiscuit, which are fine enough movies, but he doesn't feel very inspired by this material. I don't really understand what he thought he could do with it. But I feel like a more interesting, more visual director could possibly bring more to this. And even if you have to keep the PG-13 rating, a more talented director, a more clever director might be able to edge around that violence in a more meaningful way than Ross seems to do here, where he sort of glosses it over or weirdly even tries to ignore it at times. At times, the fighting, the violence, the Hunger Games themselves feels incidental. So I have to say, I give the movie a C+. I don't think it's awful. I think that there's enough here that's interesting, and even when it fails, it's sort of failing in an interesting way. And it really made me think about violence in movies in a way that I never really thought about before. So there's my review. Leave comments below if you agree or disagree. I know there's going to be a lot of disagree here because it seems like everyone's singing the praises of the Hunger Games right now. But I think in time to pass, we'll be looking at this movie, and some of these points that I'm raising might be more clear or might be more evident. I don't know.